So first, Happy New Year. It is so good to see y'all. Every time I come here, I just feel so blessed by your presence. So thank you for coming and joining and being with all of us in this soft and safe place that we call Unity of the Woodlands. You all bless me so much, every single one of you, and I mean that very, very sincerely. So I'd like to start with a story that I didn't even tell my son I was going to share. Theo, I hope this works out for you. Too late. I usually always tell my family if I'm going to talk about them, and Theo, is it okay? He says, yeah. All right. So as many of y'all know, I live in Houston, and I commute here to the Woodlands, and thankfully, I always have a place to stay with our board president, Jan Couture. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I know. That's what we tease about, right? Where's my espresso machine? Anyway, so not this week, the week before that, whatever, a couple of weeks ago, I brought my son. I decided, you know what, it was going to be a work and play trip, and so we stayed at a hotel on the waterway. And I worked, and he sat in my office while I worked. And then we went to the hotel in the waterway, and we checked in, and then he wanted to walk. And it was chilly out, but we walked for 2 hours. It's a lot of walking you can do there. I mean, you can really walk. Of course, ended up at the bookstore, bought some books, as I always do. And then we found a restaurant, and we ate, had a wonderful time. And then we went to the hotel room, and it was cozy, and it was nice. Of course, I'm already in my pajamas. And he says, I want to go walking again. And I'm like, what? I thought we were already settled for the night. And he's like, no, by myself. I'm like, what? It's dark outside. Don't you know? Like, that's how I was raised, right? It's dark outside and you lock the doors, right? You're afraid of what could happen. And so he's like, yeah, I want to go. I'm just going to walk around here. I'll be fine. I want to go. And I'm like, what? And so finally I say to him, I don't have the inner resources for this, which translation means I am not willing to sit with my fear right now. That's what that means. I don't have the inner resources. I'm not willing to sit with my fear because you're going to be out and I don't know what's going to happen, right? So again, he's like, well, I want to go. You know how they are. I want to go, right? So finally, what does a parent do but lose their temper and say, fine, just go. Just go. My son looks at me and says, I don't want to leave this way. It just makes me want to cry. I don't want to leave this way. So I may not be emotionally adjusted, but I raised someone who is. Right? I may not have it, but he certainly does, right? So I look at him and okay, stay close, stay in touch, right? Of course, I have to involve my husband in it, who's in Houston at home. You've got to talk to him. I stay in the room in my pajamas and say, he is safe, he's free, he's loved. That has always been my mantra for him, always. And I was reminded of our family therapist who I worked with years ago who said to me, you cannot project your fear onto him. Very often we think that the world is more frightening than it is. And if you do that to him, then you are impeding his growth and his independence. So that's what I had to deal with and think about. So I do have a lot of points here. I promise I'll move on to them. So what I'm sharing with you guys is where my growth is, and I imagine if that's where my growth is, it's where other people's growth is, right? I even had a conversation with Marty this morning about this exact thing, because life is always going to happen, right? It's going to bring us things that we do not want to see. That's the idea. But here's what we have control over: our minds, right? We have control over our minds, and we have control over how we can react to what life is bringing us. So I can choose to say, he is safe, he's loved, he's free, rather than scream at him and say, no, something's going to happen to you, you can stay here, right? I can choose how I react to that. And so what I'm asking for us for this year is to go deeper into those spiritual practices, those spiritual tools that we teach here at Unity. And I feel like when we do that, when we practice knowing that centeredness of love, that it's always here and we can choose that and live through that, then we will live a life of grace and love. And so the theme, as it's for January, but the theme for the entire year for all of us that I want us all to practice and go back to, and I've been working with it this past month, and that is live in grace, walk in love. Live in grace, walk in love. I have been saying this to myself every day. I can't even tell you how many times a day I've said it. Live in grace, walk in love. And I want to share with you the definitions because I always like to know that we are on the same page when it comes to definitions. Revealing Word, Unity co-founder Charles Fillmore says that grace is will, favor, aid from God in the process of regeneration. Will, favor, aid from God in the process of regeneration. Regeneration is simply the idea of alignment of the mind, body, and spirit, and an alignment so that you are living through the Christ ideal. That's what regeneration is. One of my favorite definitions of grace is by popular writer Anne Lamott. She's also a novelist, and she says, "I do not understand the mystery of grace, only that it meets us where we are and does not leave us where it found us." That's grace. Isn't that beautiful? It's grace that always helps me forgive when I feel like I'm not able to forgive. I think of grace as a river, as a flowing river. And in those times when I feel like I can't, or I don't want to, or I'm not able to, whatever it is, I can put my toe in that river and that grace will come. That's what grace is. It's a favor. And it's always coming at us, but we have to be aware of that and awaken to it. And so the thing is when you live in that grace, you're immediately going to walk into love. Would you not agree? Because that's what it is. It helps you it's a movement that already happens, and it takes you in, just like the river, into that love. Love, as you know, is our co-founder, Charles Fillmore, talks about love as it's the divine attribute that harmonizes and restores. It harmonizes and restores. It heals. That's what love does, right? That's what we are. That's what we're capable of. Yes. That's our divine belonging is love. That's all we're really asked to do in this life is to love. So let us say it together. I live in grace and I walk in love.
I live in
Grace and I walk in love. I live in grace and I walk in love.
I live in grace and I walk in love.
And so that's the invitation of the year. And every month not every month, every Sunday I give you guys affirmations, right? Every Sunday. And this one is the one I want you to carry all year. Just forefront in your mind. I live in grace, I walk in love. And if you have forgotten it, go to the app. Go to the app. If you haven't signed up for the app, sign up for the app. If you don't know how, go see Jan Couture, right? She will help you sign up, and you will find it, and you will find sermon notes from today. So, living in grace and walking in love. Thank you so much, Michelle, for the wonderful, wonderful, amazing story of the Restless Wanderer. That was so perfect. Oh, my goodness, so perfect. Hopefully I can, live up to that. So, are you, oh, my goodness. So, are you a restless wanderer? Raise your hand. Are you ready? I'm raising mine, y'all. I knew. All right. Look at Lee. I love it. 2 hands. Are you a restless wanderer? So this title comes out of, some of you may recognize the Cain and Abel story. When Cain says he's going to be a restless wanderer, and God first says you're going to be a restless wanderer, and then Cain says, I'm going to be a restless wanderer, right? That's what it comes out of. And so for me, the living in grace and the walking in love is the solution, is the antidote, is the medicine to prevent the restless wandering, right? I know, some of you look confused. I'll get there, I promise. My sister's like, what? I'm going to get there, I promise you. You will be convinced by the end of this. So, the story of Cain and Abel, I want to tell you, is a story about finding a God of second chances. So often we go to the Hebrew scriptures and we think of it just being a vengeful God, right? An angry God. But we also in this story have a God of second chances, and I'll explain to you why. And it's important to know there's a God of second chances, because it's that God that when I know that there are times, and oh my goodness, I'm always aware of this, when I withhold love from myself. Does anyone do that? When you withhold love from yourself. And so I'm recognizing when I'm withholding love for myself, how about I think about the God of second chances, right? The God of third chances, fourth chances, fifth chances. That's what grace is. That's what grace is. So I'm going to talk about that story, and then I want to talk about Bishop Desmond Tutu, someone that I just absolutely adore, who was the very embodiment of love and grace. The very embodiment. And I once heard an interview 15 years ago, I'll remember exactly. My son was a baby, and I was listening to this interview, and it was with him and Dalai Lama. And what he said continues to live with me, so I want to share that with you guys. And then last, I'm going to give a preview of what we have in store for you guys for the year. And what's in store for you guys is classes you can come to, things you can do so you can live in grace and love. So, Cain and Abel. Who knows that story? Okay, quite good. Lots of y'all know. Okay. I read it earlier in the week, and the idea of the restless wanderer just really struck me. And that piece I just really held on to, and I was like, what is the restless wanderer? Because as you guys know, in Unity, we read the Bible to like see how we are in those stories, like how even those elements of those stories speak to us and where we are at the moment. And at the moment, I was feeling like a restless wanderer. And for me, that means living in fear, which I talked about, anxiety, worry, living in not feeling good enough, right? Worthy enough. So I was stuck in that. So just to give you a review, the story of Cain and Abel, it appears in the Hebrew scriptures. It comes after the two creation stories. The first is when, as you know, the world comes into existence through divine initiative. The second is when God forms humans. First forms Adam from the earth, and then, as you know, Eve is taken from the rib of Adam. No, these are creation myths, right? They are creation myths. So they can do funny things. And because they do, right? And then Adam and Eve have Cain and Abel. That is their offspring. Cain is the firstborn. He's a tiller of the land. Speaking of your uncle, a tiller of the land, right? And Abel keeps sheep. And so over the course of time, Cain brings to the Lord an offering, and it's an offering of fruit from the ground. That's what he gives, an offering from the ground. Abel gives him firstling, I guess, sheep, and it's like the fattest of the sheep. So just think of it as like a really good, great offering he gives to God. So the story goes that God is really pleased with what Abel gives him. Now keep in mind, Abel's the secondborn. Really pleased with it. Cain, he's like, whatever. Not so pleased with. It's like, whatever. So what do you think happens to Cain? He's angry. He's resentful, right? The Lord says, why are you angry, and why has your countenance fallen? Countenance mean face. If you do well, will you not be accepted? And if you do not do well, sin is lurking at the door. Its desire is for you, but you must master it. Sin is lurking at the door, but you must master it. So he's saying, you're angry. And it's very possible with that anger, you're going to live from that anger, right? That's what he's saying. You're going to live from that resentment. You have a choice here, is basically, you can master this, right? Which, what did I say? What are we here to do? But master the mind. Master the mind. And sin and unity is basically missing the mark. He's like, hey, you've missed the mark, right? You missed the mark. So in response, what does Cain do? Kills his brother. He does not master the mind, right? He does not sit with his feelings. He did not have the inner resources. That's really what happened, right? He did not have the inner resources. So then the Lord says, what have you done? Right? But first he said, this is when he says, hey, where's your brother? Right? He goes looking for a brother, and this is where he says, I don't know. Am I my brother's keeper? Y'all will recognize that line. And then Lord says, what have you done? Listen, your brother's blood is crying out to me from the ground, and now you are cursed from the ground, which has opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. The ground will no longer yield to you its strength, and you will be a fugitive and a wanderer on the earth. Cain says, my punishment is greater than I can bear. Today you have driven me away from the soil, and I shall be hidden from your face. I shall be a fugitive and a wanderer on the earth. Restless, right? And anyone who meets me will kill me. Here's what's significant. The Lord says, not so. Whoever kills Cain will suffer a sevenfold vengeance. And the Lord put a mark on Cain so that no one who came upon him would kill him. Then Cain went away from the presence of the Lord and settled in the land of Nod. That's a lot, right? That's a lot. I'll promise I'll break it down. First, I want to say that sibling rivalry is really common in Genesis, right? You see it in Joseph and the brothers. Remember what the brothers do with Joseph? You see it with Noah's sons. Abraham and Lot, although they're not siblings, right? I think they're uncle and nephew. But here's what's significant about that, seeing that family strife, is that it is an awareness of we got to get this family stuff right, because when we get it right, then our social unit is going to be good, right? You notice that, right? When our families are doing well, the society is going to do well. When families know how to deal with jealousy and resentment, when they know how to forgive, then what is going to happen? When you live in the world, you're going to give the same, right? So that's one of the things, is like sibling rivalry is really, and the other piece of it is like in this story, you find murder. In the stories to come, people learn how to deal with it so that they resolve it with peace. Keep in mind, Joseph's brothers, they don't kill him. I mean, they sell him into slavery, which isn't really the kind thing to do, but it wasn't. But it wasn't murder, right? And what happened with them, it resolves itself peacefully. It resolves itself with forgiveness, which is beautiful, which is where we're going with this. So the story for me helped me to think about the Cain side of me, right? That restless wanderer. And when I give power over to that, what happens? The resentment. Resentment, right? That's not good. And when I'm resentful and I'm stuck or I'm scared or I'm worried, there isn't room for love, for grace, for anything good. Has anyone ever noticed that? There isn't room for anything else. So that's one piece of it. The other piece of it is Cain says, look, I'm going to be a restless wanderer. And God is like, no, this is what's going to happen. Now, the sevenfold vengeance, which you need to know, is what he's saying is like, if somebody else kills you for 7 more generations, they're not going to be in a good position. That's what he's saying. And what I like to read this as is like what God is actually doing for Cain is giving him another chance for repentance, right? No one else is going to murder you, and I'm not going to murder you, but here's your second chance. Isn't that beautiful? Here's your second chance. Cain gets a second chance. We get a second chance. We always have more chances. And this takes me to Bishop Tutu. And as you all know, he's a well-known human rights activist. He won the 1984 Nobel Peace Prize for efforts in resolving and ending apartheid. And as I said, I heard this interview with him, and it just has always stuck with me and stays with me, because the interviewer asked him, what is the nature of God? Who do you know God to be? And what he said is, God never says goodbye to bad rubbish. And he put his hands up and he's like, what God does, he's like, God picks us up, dusts us off, and sends us off our way. Isn't that beautiful? God never says goodbye to bad rubbish. And that's something that I have to think of often. And I know that in Unity we think of God as an energy, right? As the very life energy of everything. And I know in this story, God is more like of an anthropomorphic being. Would you not agree? That very much is. But there are times that I need that anthropomorphic being. I do. There are times I need that, and it's okay to need that. And it's, again, the God of second chances, right? Because what happens when I think of God in that way, then I'm able to be more gentle with myself. I'm able to stand and open myself to the flow of grace. Now, purposefully, I didn't create a slide for this, and I will tell you why. I want you to go to the app. That's why. And if you don't, you put it in the app, right? Yay, she did. Okay. I sent it to her yesterday. Or the newsletter. If you do not get our newsletter, please sign up for a newsletter, because then you will know about things like this. So I'm inviting you into living in grace and walking in love. And here's how. During Lent, we're going to have a prayer meditation group based on the book, The Gathering. It's going to be Thursday evenings at 7 p.m., beginning March 6th. Lent is upon us. Ash Wednesday is March 5th. So we'll begin the sessions with meditation, and then we will have prayer time with one another and hold one another in prayer. And then keep an eye out for prayer meditation workshops with Reverend Vita and my sister Chris. I will give you those dates as those show up. And then the other thing that is absolutely new this year, we've never done, and I'm so excited about it, and that's we're going to have a fall faith series. It will begin in September. It will last for 9 weeks. This series is going to be based on Eric Butterworth's book, Discover the Power Within, which is a great, wonderful, wonderful book. And what's even more exciting is not only will those of us who speak will be speaking from that book. We'll probably do 2 chapters at a time, I believe, Vita. That sounds good, 2 chapters at a time. And after you hear your inspiring Sunday message on that book, we will come together in this room with brown bag lunches and do a deeper dive into the book. So if you want to, get it now, get started on it, and be prepared for that. And then something else that is new is that we will be honoring once a month those individuals who volunteer and make our community what it is. And once a month we will ask those of you we know that do that and give you and have a cameo for you. And also just come be with us. Just come be with us and anything that you feel called to do. So I want to end with a quote from Bishop Desmond Tutu. He says, I am deeply thankful for those moments in the early morning when I try to be quiet, to sit in the presence of the gentle and compassionate and unruffled one, to try to share in or be given some of that divine serenity. People often ask about the source of my joy, and I can honestly say that it comes from my spiritual life, and specifically from these times of stillness. They are an indispensable part of my day, regardless of what else I might face. So that's the invitation. Every day, be with the one, and then please come and join us as we join in with the one, and know that I love you.